Then I said to them, "You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me. They replied, "Let us start rebuilding." So they began this good work. But when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. "What is this you are doing?" they asked. "Are you rebelling against the king?" I answered them by saying, "The God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it." Eliashib, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. They dedicated it and set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and as far as the Tower of Hananel. The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and Zachar, son of Imri, built next to them. The fish gate was rebuilt by the sons of Hesenah. They laid its beams and put its doors and bolts and bars in place. Meremoth, son of Uriah, the son of Hakos, repaired the next section. Next to him, Meshullam, son of Berechiah, the son of Meshezabel, made repairs, and next to him, Zadok, son of Bana, also made repairs. The next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervisors. The Jeshanah gate was repaired by Joiada, son of Paseah, and Meshullam, son of Besodiah. They laid its beams and put its doors with their bolts and bars in place. Next to them, repairs were made by men of Gideon and Mizpah, Melatiah of Gibeon, and Jadon of Meronoth, places under the authority of the governor of Trans-Euphrates. Uzziel, son of Harahiah, one of the goldsmiths, repaired the next section of Hananiah. One of the perfume makers made repairs next to that. They restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. Raphiah, son of Hu, ruler of a half district of Jerusalem, repaired the next section. Adjoining this, Jediah, son of Harumaph, made repairs opposite his house, and Hattush, son of Hashabniah, made repairs next to him. Malchijah, son of Harim, and Hashub, son of Patha Moab, repaired another section, and the tower of the ovens. Shallum, son of Halohesh, ruler of half district of Jerusalem, repaired the next sections with the help of his daughters. The valley gate was repaired by Hanan and the residents of Zanoah. They rebuilt it and put its doors with the bolts and bars in place. They also repaired 1,000 cubits of the wall as far as the dung gate. The dung gate was repaired by Malchijah, son of Rechab, ruler of the district of Beth Hekerim. He built it and put its doors with their bolts and bars in place. The fountain gate was repaired by Shallum, son of Kol-Hozer, ruler of district of Mizpah. He rebuilt it, roofing it over and putting its doors and bolts and bars in place. He also repaired the wall and the pool of Siloam by the king's garden, as far as the steps going down from the city of David. Beyond him, Nehemiah, son of Azbuk, ruler of half district of Bethzur, made repairs up to a point opposite the tombs of David, as far as the artificial pool and the house of the heroes. Next to him, the repairs were made by the Levites under Rehum, son of Bani. Beside him, Hashabiah, ruler of half the district of Keilah, carried out repairs for his district. Next to him, the repairs were made by the fellow Levites under Benaiah, son of Henadad, ruler of the other half district of Keilah. Next to him, Ezra, son of Jeshua, ruler of Mizpah, repaired another section from a point facing the ascent of the armory as far as the angle of the wall. Next to him, Baruch, son of Zabbai, zealously repaired another section from the angle to the entrance of the house of Eliashib, the high priest. Next to him, Meremoth, son of Uriah, the son of Hakos, repaired another section from the entrance of Eliashib's house to the end of it. The repairs next to him were made by the priests from the surrounding region beyond them. Benjamin and Hashub made repairs in front of their house, and next to them, Azariah, son of Messiah, the son of Ananiah, made repairs beside the house. Next to him, Benu, son of Henadad, repaired another section from Azariah's house to the angle and the corner, and Palal, son of Uzai, worked opposite, and the angle, and the tower projecting from the upper palace near the court of the guard. Next to him, Pedaiah, son of Parosh, and the temple servants living on the hill of Ophel, made repairs up to a point opposite the water gate towards the east and projecting the tower. Next to them, the men of Tekoa repaired another section from the great projecting tower to the wall of Ophel. Above the horse gate, the priests made repairs, each in front of his own house. Next to them, Zadok of Immer made repairs opposite his house. Next to him, Shemaiah, son of Shechaniah, the guard at the east gate, made repairs. Next to him, Hananiah, son of Shelemiah, and Hanan, the sixth son of Zalaph, repaired another section. Next to them, Meshullam, son of Berechiah, made repairs opposite his living quarters. Next to him, Malchijah, one of the goldsmiths, made repairs as far as the house of the temple servants and merchants opposite the inspection gate, and as far as the room above the corner, and between the room above the corner and the sheep gates, the goldsmiths and merchants made repairs.
Well done. That was so long, so long, and so many names, You did a great job. Hello, I'm Ellen. I'm a member of the congregation here, if you don't already know me. And this morning, I'm continuing our series in Nehemiah. Tim Brown mentioned at the start that this series has been chosen because of the season that we're facing here at Central. I worked out the other day that I have been at Central for 16 years, which is crazy as I say it. I came here as a student and then I've stayed and had my family here. But I've seen the church go through a lot of different seasons in that time and look very different at various points. And I can confidently say that right now, Central is in a season of change. We're in a season of growth. God is doing something new here, and that's really exciting. But we have a responsibility, don't we, to pay attention to what God is doing and make sure that we're growing in the right way and we're investing in the right things. And that's where Nehemiah comes in. Nehemiah is a story in the Old Testament about a physical building project that has a lot to tell us about how we build spiritually here in Central today. And really we're trying to answer the question, how can we build here and now to create something that's going to last. Previously, Tim Brown spoke about getting the right blueprint in place. And then last week, Dan spoke about waiting on God and preparation. And this week, we're going to think about unity. What brings us together? I'm going to talk about two things. Firstly, how we unify around the right vision. And then secondly, what that unity looks like in practice. So let's rejoin the story just as Nehemiah is telling the Jewish leaders about his unique vision. I'm just going to read the very first bit again, starting at verse 17. Then I said to them, "You see the trouble that we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me. They replied, "Let us start rebuilding." So they began this good work. But when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. "What is this you are doing?" they asked. "Are you rebelling against the king?" I answered them by saying, "The God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it." So we've already heard in the series so far about the vision that God has given Nehemiah to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Just to recap, the Jews are scattered in exile, the walls of the city are in ruin, and although they're free to worship God alongside the other religions of the day, they're vulnerable. They've got no political power, they can't mobilize, and they're feeling weak. We see it summarized there in verse 17. Jerusalem is in ruins and the gates have been burned with fire. And later on in that same verse, Nehemiah uses this word disgrace to talk about their situation. The problem is that their reputation, and ultimately God's reputation, is at stake as represented by Jerusalem. Into this situation, God puts a vision on Nehemiah's heart. Now, it's important to notice here that the walls have been burnt down for quite a while. It's not just happened. I imagine when it originally happened, there were lots of people who said, "Let's rebuild the walls," but they kind of forgot about it because it was such a crazy task to attempt. They've disregarded that idea. So what God is giving Nehemiah is actually fresh perspective on an existing situation. He gives him this slightly wild and wonderful idea. And from there, as Dan was looking at last week, he goes to the king and he gets the king's protection and provision. And then suddenly it's more than just a crazy idea. It's actually a window of opportunity. But let's be realistic. It's still actually quite a fragile and uncertain hope. The king's favor can be withdrawn at any time. It's quite fickle. And the enemies they're facing are very real. They've already appeared in the story, but in verse 19, we're introduced to them again. Sanballat, Tobiah, and additionally Geshem. I always kind of imagine them as like three guys hanging around throwing insults. But they're actually a lot more than that. They're warlords. Each of them represents an army of soldiers. And they also represent a territory, the territories of Samaria, Ammon, and areas of Arabia. So geographically, they're actually surrounding Jerusalem and what Nehemiah is doing. And they're provoked because what Nehemiah is suggesting is actually quite brazen. He's basically trying to give the Jewish people an advantage should conflict arise. He's giving them a way to mobilize in the future, and he's setting them up to have greater power and status in society. No wonder their enemies are a bit alarmed by this plan. The picture being painted is that what Nehemiah is doing is dangerous, and he is quite literally surrounded. You could think of him as balancing on a tightrope with doubts around him, and still he sticks with the vision and he steps out in faith. I think this is a really good picture for what happens when God invites an individual or a community into something new. It starts with a prompting of the Holy Spirit. And then as that vision is put before God, things start to fall into place, either practically or circumstantially, and then a window of opportunity is open. But there is always a moment when we need to step out in faith. There's always a moment where we need to commit. And quite often that moment comes when the doubts and the dangers are still very real. The best illustration that I could think of this is one from many years ago. Ashley and I were involved in the youth work here in Central. Some people might remember. And at one point, the leadership team took a decision to take the teenagers out treasure hunting. I don't know if you have ever done treasure hunting. It's basically where a group of people pray, and they pray for words of knowledge and prophecy, and then they go out into the streets and you just talk to people, and you offer to pray for them. And if it's appropriate, you might think one of the words is for them, you'd give them that. And it's a really great form of outreach. It's also absolutely terrifying. It's terrifying as a person of faith, and the group that we had at the time, the teenagers were all in quite different stages. Some of them would have said they weren't Christians. Some of them were very new to faith. So it was a really high-risk situation. We were kind of like, God, you've really got to show up here to make this work, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult. And, just practically, logistically, safeguarding everything kind of felt like a big deal. But we pushed through and we did do it. And, it was so powerful because some of those teenagers got to pray with strangers. And even the ones that didn't pray got to see us as a group actually putting our faith into practice in a high-stakes situation. And I think probably they would remember that morning more than some of the other sessions that we ran with them. I think that's the sort of thing that Nehemiah is modeling here. It's when you're prompted by God to do something that's a little bit scary, and you step out in faith anyway, knowing that God is going to meet you. So what does Nehemiah do next? Well, he puts the vision in front of his community. That's what he's doing in this section of the passage. He gathers the Jewish leaders and he tells them everything that's happened. He doesn't work alone. He doesn't take the vision off on his own to execute by himself. Yes, God can work like that, but that's rare. Actually, more often when God is moving, he calls us to move as a church in community. And when you consider the craziness of the idea and how dangerous it was going to be and how hard it was going to be, actually, it's kind of a miracle that the Jewish leaders agree to it. That's the Holy Spirit inviting them to respond to what God is doing. But as they do, we go from Nehemiah on his own, dreaming a wild dream, to a community pursuing a work that God is bringing about. And Nehemiah makes this triumphant statement in verse 20, where he answers the taunts of his enemy. The God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. Nehemiah, in the face of his enemies, is unfazed. He has this ironclad conviction that really the project is not about him. It's about what God is doing. And I wonder, as our church is in this season of growth and change, what is God prompting you to? Are you listening to him? Are you open to what he might be saying? It might be a vision that you have, something that you're passionate about, or maybe a new perspective that only you can bring. But equally, I think it might be somebody else's vision that we as a congregation need to get behind. He's not asking us to build alone. And I think we also need to be challenged that it might look different from what has come before. As a church, we need to be open to that, and we need to be ready to step out in faith. Now, as we've been going through the book of Nehemiah, we've also been looking at another Old Testament story that's a bit of an inverse of the story in Nehemiah. It's sort of the shadow version, and that's the Tower of Babel. It's also a building project. It's also quite a successful building project in some ways, or impressive, that is, but it has a very different outcome. I'm just going to look quickly at Genesis 11, hopefully on the screen. Great. Starting at verse 3. They, as in the people of Babel, said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." The people of Babel have a very different vision. First off, they're not listening to God at all. They're agreeing what to do amongst themselves. These are plans entirely of their own making. And what's their motivation? In verse 4, it says it there. They want to make a name for themselves. They want to look good. They want to be well known. And actually, they're also afraid, as we see at the end of verse 4. They're worried about being scattered by God, so they make this plan to defend themselves. The danger's not even upon them, but they're already making plans because they're afraid of losing what they've got. If Nehemiah has a vision that's fueled by faith, the people of Babel have a vision that is fueled by fear. And before we look at this story and think we're not in it, I think these are exactly the kind of traps that we can fall into as a church when we're thinking about what to do next. It's a trap when we start getting motivated by what makes us look good or more visible. It's a trap when you're deciding what to get involved in and you get worried about losing power or status or doing a job that's maybe beneath you. And what about when we don't involve God in the plan at all? I think that's really easy to do, actually, probably the easiest thing to do. We just kind of get involved in something and it's going well and we just press on in our own understanding and we don't actually involve God in what should happen. The problem with all of these attitudes is that they all eventually lead to a vision that is shaped by fear. Instead, we need to be listening to the one who is doing something. We need to be servants like Nehemiah who step out in obedience and faith, even when it's tough. Okay, so if we've thought a little bit about how we need to unite around the right vision, let's think now about what that unity actually looks like. In the second half of this passage, amazingly read, we have this extremely long descriptive section that names in detail all of the people who contributed to the wall. I'm not going to read it again, you'll be glad to hear. A lot of these names have been lost in time and we don't know who they are. We do know who some of them were, but they're all preserved here. It's this account of an incredible collaborative effort. It's representative of teamwork and diversity and amazing coordination to make the extraordinary happen. And throughout the passage, this particular word comes back again and again. It's translated repaired in this version, but the word repair doesn't mean restore. It actually means make firm or make strong. In other words, what Nehemiah is asking the people to do is not to restore the wall where they find it exactly as it used to be. He's saying, take whatever's there, take what you find, and make it strong, make it firm. I think this is really helpful for us in understanding what it looks like to build our church today. Because we're not building a physical wall. We're building a body that is made up of people united by God's Spirit. Our equivalent of laying down stones is building up the family, making strong, encouraging, and building up the individuals that make up this church. And when we're thinking about what we do as a church, it's not about replicating the past or even working to some sort of blueprint of what church should be. It's about acting on the promptings of the Holy Spirit to strengthen what God is doing in these people in this season of our church. I think Central has always been a church with a bit of an identity crisis. We're not a traditional parish church. A lot of the people who come here come from all over the city. And what that means is that the ministries that have been here have varied a lot over the years. At various points, we've had a massive student ministry. We've got loads of families right now. We've got young professionals on the doorstep. There are local people who live in the parish. We've got homeless and inner city ministries going on. We have an older contingent from Revival several decades ago. Essentially, there is no blueprint for what Central as a church should look like. God has done many different and remarkable things here over the years, and he will do many different and remarkable things in the years to come. I think the question is, what is he doing right now? What is he doing in you and me and us in this season of the church? Okay, so if we need to make the family strong as our first point, the second point then is going where the work is needed. If I said to you, I want you to go and build a house right now, here's some bricks, here's some land, off you go. I think you might say to me, well, how do I do that? Can we get an expert in, please? Bricklayers are a shortage profession currently. I know there are a few good construction people in the congregation, so probably we'd come to you and ask you what to do. But the point is that you'd get in somebody who really knew what they were doing. So who does Nehemiah commission to do this very significantly challenging building project? It's absolutely everybody, and quite literally everybody. I don't know if you noticed as we were going through, but there's a perfumer, there's a goldsmith, there are merchants, priests, district officers, temple servants. We've got people grouped by their location. We've got people grouped by their family name. We've even got one man in verse 12 who enlists the help of his daughters, which would have been quite a break with the societal expectations at that time. There are all walks of life, all occupations, all going where the work is needed. I like to think that there was a conversation with the perfumer where he said, well, I know quite a lot about making perfumes, but I don't really know anything about building walls. And Nehemiah said, doesn't matter, come and build with us anyway. What they needed was to lay the stones of that wall, and that's what everybody did, whether they felt qualified to or not. And it's the same for us now, building our church community here. It doesn't matter what your skill set is. It matters who we are. We are family, and God's Spirit is in us, and the Spirit is who will equip us to do what we need to do. This point is reinforced by the one slightly negative example in the passage. I don't know if you noticed it as we were going through. There's one set of people who get a call out for the wrong reasons. In verse 5, the next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervisors. The nobles of Tekoa refused to take instructions from people that they perceived to be a lower status than them. They considered themselves to be above the tasks that were being asked of them. I wonder how that conversation went. In contrast to the perfumer, I bet it was along the lines of, we're not really specialists in bricks and laying walls. Maybe we can come and look at the wall after you've finished building it. Maybe we'll make a speech in front of it or cut a ribbon. We'll come after the work is done, and then we'll take some credit. But the book of Nehemiah calls them out, and they're forever preserved here as petty and full of pride. And their pride is the pride of Babel, isn't it? They think the work is about them. But it's not. It's about God. It's about us as God's servants going where the work is needed and doing what needs to be done. I think there are many ways where we can have this attitude. When there are ministries that are crying out for people to help and we think someone else will do that. When we don't take the time to connect and invest with the people that God has placed us alongside. Or maybe somebody in the church does have a vision and we don't quite get behind it because they don't happen to be our sort of person. Don't be like the nobles of Tekoa. Don't get excluded from this wonderful narrative and what God is doing. In contrast, the labouring classes of Tekoa actually get a second mention in verse 27. So they do double effort while their nobles do nothing. And I know who I want to be in this story. I wonder if you could take a moment right now to think about people in this church who you know who might need some support. They might be a bit isolated. They might be going through something. They might just need some practical help. They might be people you just need to check in on. But building up our church is about us being family. It's about us following the promptings of the Holy Spirit to build up the people that God has placed alongside you. Go to where the work is needed. Finally then, contribute what you can. The last point is maybe a non-obvious one, but as you look through the passage, all the contributions are different. There are some names, including the men of Tekoa that we just mentioned, who appear more than once, who do multiple bits. And there are some entries that repair an entire stretch of the wall, including gates. But then you get a verse like verse 23, where it says, Benjamin and Hashub made repairs in front of their house. Some people are repairing literally what they find in front of their house. And it doesn't matter if it's the person who did 2 sections or the person who just did the small section. They were both vital, and they're both listed in the passage. Every contribution is different, but they are all of equal importance. And when I was preparing this, I particularly wanted to focus on people who don't feel that they can give as much as others right now. Maybe you have life circumstances, maybe it's a particular season that you're in, whatever it is, there might be something that is inhibiting you from feeling like you can do 2 sections of wall. Maybe you can only cope with the bit that's just outside your house. And that's okay. It still makes all the difference. And it is still absolutely needed by this church. And it's necessary for what we're doing. That's part of being family, isn't it? Supporting people no matter how much they're able to give. Okay, so to recap then, we need a vision of faith and not fear. We need to make our family strong. We need to go where the work is, and we need to contribute what we can. We've kind of seen this tale of two building projects here. One is Babel, where the people choose to build without God. They put themselves and their own glory first, and they're scared of losing what they've got. And ultimately, that leads to destruction. They lose God's favour and their community, and they're scattered over the face of the earth, which is ironically the very thing they were trying to avoid. Nehemiah, on the other hand, is the story of a new hope. The people choose to build with God in faith, and they come together in this extraordinary way to defy the odds. But the story doesn't end there for Nehemiah. This book is a stepping stone in the story of the Old Testament. Spoiler alert for Nehemiah is that the Jews get their walls, they get their temple, they're invited to turn back to God once more, but they don't. The ultimate conclusion of this book is that God's people need a spiritual heart change as well as a physical symbol. And we know, don't we, who that heart change ultimately comes from. Nehemiah is pointing us ahead to Jesus. Jesus, as he takes on our sin and brokenness, as he dies for us and is raised again, he is the one who gives us a new heart. He gives us the Holy Spirit, who, living in us, guides and speaks to us. And it's not just about the Holy Spirit giving us a vision like Nehemiah. It's also about the Holy Spirit inhabiting us as God's church. We are the new living temple, and Jesus is the rock on which we build. So as we think about how to build something that lasts, let's look to Jesus to give us the vision. But let's also look to him as the one who empowers us to bring that vision about, as the one who brings us together. He's doing something. Let's join in. We're going to go to a time of worship now, but I think there were just a few groups of people that I wanted to call out, and maybe this is you, maybe you respond to it. So first of all, people who have a vision, maybe the Nehemiahs in the congregation, who want prayer to discern the way forward. Please do pray about that. But maybe people who want to help build the church and need guidance, knowing where to focus their efforts. What people do you need to build up, or what ministries do you need to get behind? And finally, I just wanted to focus on people who are struggling. Maybe you're the person who can only build in front of your house, and you really need God to meet you this morning where you're at. Maybe think about those things as we go back.
So just as the band come and join me, I'm just going to